Okay, that's one half of the thing. Well,
Yeah.
there you go. I see you now. All right.
Okay.
We in business. All right.
We
All right.
good. I don't know
I
what
guess I'll
happened
hang up,
on
I
yeah.
suppose.
Okay. I don't know what happened on my end though. On my I never got the link on my computer, but okay.
I don't even, I can't, yeah, I don't know, man. I'm glad we finally got it together at least. And,
Yay.
so far it's just us. So all
Okay.
this stuff, no one will know. They won't even know that we ain't even starting on time. They'll
Okay.
pick up on it and they'll say, what did we miss?
I know, right?
All
Uh,
right. Anyway, good to meet you, Chinganji Akinyela.
good to
And here's my colleague, Charlotta Kinchin,
Hi.
our historian in the
Hello.
Pan African Studies
Hi.
Department. And
Nice to meet you.
yeah, and who's that? Who's the image in the background? I can't see it.
That's Nahanda Biadun.
Ah, exactly, exactly, exactly.
Right?
All right, cool, cool,
Right?
cool.
Hold on.
Well,
Let me close this door here. Right? He's up. Here. I think he's upstairs, McCollum. No, he's not. Okay. Oh, I got a lot going on, but I'm good.
all right, cool, 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 cool. So actually, what? I was just watching the video you sent me a couple of hours ago, your
Yeah.
1987 interview with Assata. And
Yeah.
uh,
I was a little skinnier.
well,
And
that was 37 years ago by my count.
yeah.
37 years ago is a minute, you know what I mean? That's more than a second.
Yes.
But no, it was great. It was beautiful. But like I was, well, among other things, um, I was thinking, man, this sister's she's probably just really getting a kick out of this experience, you know? You know what I mean? I mean, like, just like, yeah, you just it seemed like you were just thoroughly enjoying yourself. You were doing some work, don't get me wrong. But like there was like, do you remember how you
Yeah,
felt?
it was really, really it was good. Because and then one of the things, I don't know if we were ready to try to get into some of the discussion, but um I when I read the book when it first came out, right? And I think I told you this
Okay.
when we were talking the other day.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so reading it again, it really hit me different
I bet it did.
because I mean really,
I bet it
because
did.
having after reading it the first time, meeting her, and then several times being in her presence and discussing and arguing and and working. So rereading it this time, it was like a whole another thing for me.
Uh-huh.
Very emotional. I will say that very emotional. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So
Well, I
I'm
mean that
appreciative of
go.
having this opportunity to have this discussion because I'm pretty sure that we as an organization had some discussion of it back then, but that's a long time ago, and a
Mm-hmm.
lot of things have changed, and so yeah, so it's good to be able to do this.
No, no, absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, 45 years ago. Uh November the 2nd of 1979. I mean, Charlotta doesn't remember this, but you and I remember this. And yeah, yeah, I think I was actually in New York for that UN demonstration. There was a
Were
from
you?
uh bus from Boston that went down, and I remember, some sort of, I don't remember exactly, to be honest with you, exactly what the specific thing we were protesting at the UN, but they made that announcement about Assata,
Mhm.
having being been liberated, and
Mhm.
everybody, of course, got a tremendous kick out of that, you know.
Yeah, and the
Uh,
timeliness of it. It was timed for Black Solidarity Day on November 2nd, 1979. And
no,
yeah, so that was the timing of the of her, from what I understand, from what I've been told, for her escape and her freedom. And so that statement that was made, yeah, it was for that particular purpose. And so, um, yeah, it's a history that a lot of people probably don't know or remember. Charlotta, you don't look like you much older than 45, so I'm sure you don't remember.
No, I was actually born August 18th, so I was a month and some change when that happened. So
yeah, so I think I think it's good to revisit this for young people who don't have that history. I think it's the book is extremely important. It's more important today, or as important today as it was in 45 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think she definitely touches on a lot of issues that existed then and existed for her and her experience in the movement in particular, and just just life and
Mhm.
what we are dealing with as African people who are oppressed here. Uh, she speaks to that then, and it's still pertinent today. So they say what happens is that what history repeats itself, and so I think we've lived that history for 45 years. It's not a repetition; it's a lived experience that for
Mm-hmm.
45 years. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, Chinganji, since you talked, you said that piece about how the book hits differently, reading it now as opposed to when you would have read it before. I mean, I think that's a good starting point for all of us. Because Charlotta, did you say you had read it before and now? You had read it? I think you said. I just can't remember now.
Yeah. I read it. Comprehensive exams though, like
Okay, right on.
so a lot of it was to be fair, getting in and getting out of the books, as you know, when you have a list of hundreds of books that you have to get in and get out of. So um I didn't have opportunity then, I think, to pay the respect to it. But
Mm-hmm.
also at that point, I was, you know, in my 20s maybe. Like I
Uh-huh.
didn't have the vantage point to even maybe understand what I was reading, right? Like um it felt, I approached it more as I'm reading for comps. I have a list of Black women in the civil rights and Black power movement, and I have this Angela Davis biography I got to get to. I got this Assata biography I got to get to.
There you
And I
go.
think this time around, um it gave me more of a perspective, maybe to appreciate it more and sit in it a little bit more than I
Mhm.
had originally. So I think that was a difference in age and a difference in approach.
No,
Reading it for an exam versus like, okay, now I get to sit in it a bit.
no, for sure, for sure. So that was really the first question I think I wanted to ask you all was, okay, like, so what are some of your big impressions this time around? Like, what really struck you as far as some major pieces there? And I know I said that I had y'all, okay, identify some passages we want to look at. We'll do that a little bit later, but right now I just kind of want kind of what you all were just kind of alluding to earlier. Like, okay, so like this time around, like you know, what struck you?
Yeah, so what struck me, and I had to laugh as I was, began reading it again. One, I'm kind of like Charlotta. I got to sit in it this time,
Mhm.
and my memory is a little fuzzy about. I remember it hitting me real, strongly, having heard so much about Asada, having remembering I wasn't there for Black Solidarity Day, but I remember us yelling and cheering, when we heard that she had been released and we had followed her case. Um, and so, yeah, so it was pretty profound. Now, this is the thing I wanted to mention, two things. And one, so I had to reorder the book. I had an original copy when it first came out. I think I probably had three or four copies, and I think my
Sure.
children stole them over the years. I know they were, they
That's
read them,
appropriate, by
and
the way.
yeah, and I'm not mad about it. I mean, they, movement children, and so in particular, my youngest son, I think it's in his library. The last one I think is in his library, but. So anyway, I say all that to say that when I reordered it so that I could read it for today,
Mhm.
and one of the things that struck me is that okay, there was another forward done by Angela Davis in the book that I
Okay.
have,
Okay.
and that was done in 2000. Maybe Charlotta, maybe you were doing your comps around then. I'm not sure.
Mhm.
So, so I start reading it again, right? And I'm reading this forward. I said, this is not the forward I could say there's a lot of details and stuff that I don't necessarily remember her talking about in the book, but I don't remember forward by Angela Davis.
No, that's not the original.
Yeah, it's not, but that kind of really struck me, and so yeah, and I liked it. I like what she said about it. I like how she framed it. I like how she framed Assata, and I do know that they had opportunities to, where Angela visited Cuba and they were able to cut it up, and but anyway, so that was a good thing that she did a forward, and then of
Mm-hmm.
course Lennox Hines as well. So.
Yep. Yep.
And then just like an overall kind of trivial thing, I thought, this is Law and Order before there was Law and Order shows, because she really, the details of what were
Yeah.
happening to her is the drama of it all. So,
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
Uh-huh. Okay. What stood out? What stood out to you, Charlotte?
For me, I thought about it like again, just the juxtaposition, probably the thread for me through this whole thing is when I read it first, when I'm reading it now, like so much has happened in between. And even as as grad director, I've been teaching this course, Black Youth and the Black Freedom Movement,
Mm-hmm.
and I've never used the Stardust book.
mm,
And in reading it, because a part of like what I try to do in that class is have different experiences. Students have different experiences with different texts that explore the range of the Black coming of age experience.
Yes.
Um, and I never read it as a Black coming of age story.
right.
And so, like, reading it this time was like, that was the lens. It's like this Black coming of age story. And we get so few of that from Black people, right? Like,
Yep.
we always know that, Black youth are, made to be adults before they're adults or seen to be adults before, right? And so we very rarely get those. Here's my awareness of how it was when I was young, and this is right. And so the detail of that like really stood out to me in a way that I had never really read that before, and thought about that before, and thought about like, if I teach this class again, this will be a text that I will definitely use, because it centers that experience in a way that I'm trying to think of, even some of the texts I do use don't do it as well.
I have a question for you, Charlotta. How did you stumble on the story of Asada Shakur for your work?
For me, like, I'm, I fashion myself, a Black Power studies scholar.
Okay.
And I wrote a book called Black Power in the Bluff City, where I explore the Black Power movement and youth organizing in Memphis, Tennessee. And so that was a reading field for me: Black Power, Black women activism, um, civil rights, Black Power. So that was a reading field for me. And so my one of my advisors was like, I'm a child of the '90s, so Shakur to me means Tupac,
Right.
right? And so for me, that's for the longest, that's what it meant to me. And it wasn't really until I got to, I mean, even in undergrad, people would say it, but they wouldn't assign it. So I don't even know if I was aware that she had in the biography when I was in undergrad. And I went to an HBCU for undergrad. So it seems like that's where I would have gotten that exposure, but I didn't get it until I actually went to my PhD program, and that became one of my major fields. So that was sort of my entry point into Assata Shakur.
Hmm. Even the publication, I mean, just the publication of the book itself is a revolutionary act.
Mm.
Um, because yes, they had found that she, had been granted exile, but to write this book, that was such a big thing. And for her, and the popularity of the book at the time, right? So she made money on the book, and they were like, oh, no, you can't do that. You know, you're a criminal. And so that whole piece and that happening with someone who basically escaped the system and is able to tell a story and benefit from it is just, is like unheard of kind of thing. And then, all these new laws, they say now that, you can't benefit from criminal, whatever that is that they have, right?
Yeah,
But,
yeah, for real.
and then my organization, New African Peoples Organization, endorsed the book. So in the early, when it was waiting anxiously for it to be produced, and I think maybe even some people in the organization had an opportunity to read some advanced copies. I did not, but but
Okay.
yeah. So kind of my yeah, that whole thing, just the book itself, and then I kind of read a few of the literary reviews of it, and because since Kwame said that's he wanted us to kind of look at the literary reviews, and I think I told him I'm a so-called novelist that hasn't produced anything yet, but however, I did want to look at it from that literary perspective. And when you mentioned about the juxtaposition, that's what kind of stuck out to me, is how she told her growing up story, her adventures, her issues. Each chapter, it would be a chapter of what was going on with her, legally, dealing with the Panthers, everything, and then it would be something from her childhood. And each one of
Yep.
those connected so profoundly to me because she used the book to tell the story of our oppression, how as a young Black woman, she was dealing with it at 13. I said, I was laughing because at the one point where she ran away and she was using costumes to disguise herself to look older, I said, okay, that's like her first underground, her first underground.
Oh no, yes, she was a rebel from way back, no
So
doubt.
she knew how to change up her look from
Shinganji, what?
time.
So I was just listening to watching the interview, your '87 interview with her,
Uh-huh.
and uh, I was very glad, you all got into a conversation. You had asked her something along the lines of like what she wanted to try to accomplish, or maybe it was the question of who the audience was. And I just thought the point that she made really resonates if you actually read the book. And she said, listen, I was trying to establish that my experience was a typical Black experience. And so, in terms of who I turned out to be or who they say I turned out to be, I wanted to show how my experiences are extremely common. And so this time around, well, let me answer the other question I asked and then bring it back. What I remember when the book came out in '87, of course, I gobbled it up. And I remember going, yeah, this is cool. But actually, in my naivete, I was a little disappointed too, because the things that we actually were most interested in were, of course, the things that she was not going to talk about, right? The underground, like what was happening on the underground, the escape. I mean, that's by the time the book comes out in '87. See, these are the things that actually, make this figure, Assata Shakur, kind of this legendary figure there as well. And so I was going like, I want to kind of to learn a little bit more. But of course she wasn't, like I said, one understands, but of course she wasn't going to talk about that BLA activity or getting out. This time around, reading it in preparation for this thing, um, uh, I was struck by just what's the word? How good a writer she is.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was struck by, what's the word? The very lyrical quality of her prose. I was struck by the humanity and her sense of detail of the various characters who she comes across. She really did a good job of giving these really quick sketches. They really spoke volumes about the lives of some of these different characters. Like, I don't know, like Eva in prison, or a little bit, and her family, or these various things. So it's just I was going like, man. And of course, the poems, and I like some of those poems there as well. But and then she talked about, well, I'm going on, but like you know, she really I thought she did an excellent job of like really, I think sure what you were saying earlier, Charlotta, kind of like just carrying you through what it means to like, grow up as a Black girl. And she gives you the North and the South thing, because you know there's the Wilmington and the New York piece there. So you get these, you know, you get these very, what's the word? To me, finely characterized descriptions of people and places that's striking. I'm going like, this is kind of what I was saying to you, Shinganji, in terms of, you know, kind of, I was like, this is a great work of writing. This
Right.
is a, you know, if you want to call it literature, yeah, I mean, you know, literature, that could be a, you know, a fancy term or something like that. But like, this is a very finely crafted narrative that our girl wrote here with a really excellent sense of like a eye and detail. I was very impressed on that level, you know,
Yeah, I
among
wrote
other
a couple
things.
of notes down, just like on that piece, like for overall stuff. I said that Asada Shakur uses the book to tell her story, that a revolutionary is not born but made.
Uh-huh.
We all we are all her story. She blends the story of her growing to tell how she was brought to the fight for freedom. She tells how she grew up with less and yet she had more, and this made her fight for freedom. It's personal and it's political, and the political is personal. While it said that it's a coming of age story, I like once again how she just positions her life growing up and her movement work, and she highlights the impossibility of living in a society that hates, disrespects, dehumanizes, and kills us. She tells us how America is not only trying to deny our freedom, but it's trying to kill us, you know, and through her, through what she does, um, and certainly we could get to this a little later, but some of that misogyny that
Oh,
she expresses is, you know, and I'm with you. It's like the words really jump off the page. She's really a good writer, uh,
yes.
and I found that she has, I guess, for like since she was young, she wrote, and she's a poet. She did work with the Black Panther Party paper, so she really is a prolific writer. And she's, I mean, in general, she's an artist. She's geared towards artistry. That part, remember reading the part, and just, a little personal share.
Uh-huh.
The ceramic she did ceramic. She made me a ceramic piece that I have with me that she
I
gave.
bet you did.
One of the things that we would do when we visit, I would always take her and the other sister jewelry or African clothes. They were both of them very into fashion, very much into, and I can kind of get to that when we talk about my experiences with her. But, anyway, so she made me a piece to bring back with me, which was a challenge to get back on the plane, but I still have it. And I now realize that she was into ceramics a long time ago.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like in the rereading of it, like the words jump off the page, the narrative, um, the way that it's, I mean, a part of her approach as she gets into her Panther days and she talks about how some of the jargon, some of the theories, some of the ways in which the Panther Party and she points out Huey specifically, in
Mm-hmm.
some ways that kind of becomes unapproachable. I can tell that there's a method in terms of the way that she wrote this, that she wanted to be able to break down and explain systems and structures in a way that it could be approachable to people who didn't understand the way that institutional and systemic racism works, right? Without
Uh-huh.
beating you over the head with institutional and systemic racism,
There's
right? Like you
examples
you
there.
That's
you
good.
you read it and you got the gist of it, right? And so I thought the narrative was approachable, but also just again the ways in which like you could read that and understand that she was dealing with impact and effects of the system, of course, but that
Uh-huh.
she was explaining through the retelling of these history passages too. As a historian, that just stood out to me, the way
Yeah.
in which she navigated to, retelling these pieces of history where and when it was important, but again, not hitting you over the head with it, but
Right, right.
the way she navigated that part of it. So the narrative, and also the ability to be able to, for folks who may be just coming to movement literature, right, to have that approachability, I thought was everything.
I mean, reading it this time around, I also was like, just in terms of like a sort of context. And so the context of, I think is, well, you made reference, I think earlier, Shaletta, but the context of like Black militant autobiographies.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, of course, Malcolm X, right? But like,
Yeah.
I mean, one immediate point to make in terms of what you were just saying about how she tells her tales. And as you were talking, I was thinking, yeah. So she'll give you this experience, and she'll give you like, okay, here's what the upshot is. Here's how
Mm-hmm.
this ties into philosophy, or here are the lessons to learn regarding how actually one should be trying to operate, if one is trying to be progressive. So that what's the word, that sort of welding of anecdote and and
Mm-hmm.
and life or political lesson is something that I think she does very well here. I think that's kind of part of what you were getting at. And in that sense, I mean, there's some similarity to the way that Malcolm X tells his tale there as well, in the autobiography of Malcolm X, because he's constantly doing that as well. But one other thing I wanted to throw in here, just in terms of like the context of like this book. So of course, Malcolm X in 1965, the autobiography of Malcolm X. But then, in terms of like, what do we have in terms of representatives of that later period, particularly the militant period, not so much the whole nonviolent period, but you got Cleve Sellers in 1972 with The River of No Return. That's an important book, and he has, like, well, I mean, just in terms of his accounting of the history there, is very, very important, and it's well written in its sense, but like, there's a whole different lyrical thing going on with Assata's her book. You got James Forman, The Making of Black Revolutionaries. I mean, that's one of the best titled books, right, that you could have. I mean, it's a very sort of dense narrative, and it's important there as well. Anne Moody actually is from that early period, coming of age in Mississippi. This is important. There's actually some similarities. I would draw some similarities between Anne Moody's book, particularly in terms of how they are depicting the gender piece, how the writer's status as a female or as a girl or as a woman really is determinant of a lot of different outcomes. Assata even goes deeper and just to the whole like sexual harassment, attempted rape, these dudes in a neighborhood who was trying to pull a train on her, and all that kind of stuff there as well. I mean, there's not much to say about Revolutionary Suicide by Huey Newton. You got Angela Davis's book, which I haven't read in a long time.
Davis does a good job too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then that later stuff that comes after Assata, I mean, they have, David Hillier's book, Elaine Hillier's book, and then it kind of went on from there. Those are,
Elaine
what's the
Brown.
word? Less,
Elaine
but
Brown does.
very, what's the word? Extremely opaque narratives. You know what I mean? In terms of, yeah, well, you left out almost everything. You gave us some interesting stuff, but you left out almost everything. Now, Assata leaves out a whole lot as well, but she gives you, I just think, a whole lot more in terms of a sort of like an honest sort of attempt to characterize. Okay, here's actually how I developed into this revolutionary, and does it? I just think, like I said, I'm repeating myself now, but it was like a significant, a very careful eye, I think. Whether you might end up actually absolutely agreeing with her or not, but I must say she makes a very compelling case, for her observations.
Well, it's obvious not only that she is a storyteller, but she is a phenomenal poet.
Yes.
So one of the things that we did for Women's Day, um, how will we call it, Black Women's Revolutionary Day or something like that, after the book came out, is we produced a slideshow using the poetry.
Oh,
And
okay.
So I know you asked us to kind of pick out some of our passages and favorite. And so, like in the very first section, where I did here for my little notes, being close to death and yet living. And she tells that story because her and Zaid Malik Shakur are very, very close. They're comrades and they're good friends. And she talks about how he really helped her get through her problems with the Black Panther Party, right?
Yep.
And some of the things that he was challenged to deal with um, during the time when they were trying to struggle to get the Black Panther 21 out. And so one of the confrontations that he had, people were trashing him, saying, "Oh, you're just trying to get Sundiata Acoli out because he's your close friend."
Mm-hmm.
And then he tells her, "Well, that criticism is not accurate because my brother Lumumba Shakur is one of the Panther 21, and I want him to get out. We want them all to get out, but I'm fighting for Sundiata because he should be the next in line, right?" Okay, so anyway, he's like a very close friend, but in that struggle on the New Jersey Turnpike, they chain her to him in his death. And she's forced to look over and she's chained to her close comrade friend.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
She's looking at life, and how he was so phenomenal for her and helping her through and coaching her through even in the underground, which he doesn't talk a lot about, but um, much to our disappointment, but understanding certainly that that's not something that she can talk about because there's still people that are free and we don't want to implicate nobody. So maybe I don't want to know all that. So,
Exactly.
but anyway, I say all that to say that at one point in the first part of the book, in that first section of the book, it's called Story. It
What
says,
page you on?
I'm on page 17.
Okay.
And it's at the very end of that very first chapter where she's describing what happened on the New Jersey Turnpike, right? And it says, "You died. I cried and kept on getting up, a little slower and a lot more deadly." I just love how she flips this. You know what I mean? Like, I'm really out of it, but you know what? These mofo's gonna get theirs.
I heard that. I heard that.
Yeah, so I'm just saying, I think she just has the way her poetry is like a really important part of this book, and she pulls together a lot of things that are happening in her poetry.
Mm-hmm. Can I say and I thought about this as you were naming off the revolutionary militant biographies of that period. And I thought another good thing that she did, and thinking about Elaine Brown, thinking about Angela Davis's work, is that when you read it versus when you read the women biographies versus the men biographies, the way in which specifically Assata, she centers other people, right? This is her experience, but she centers other people as well to give them their humanity, to give them their due. And not that the men didn't, but she did it in a particular way with particular care, where you could tell that she was invested in the experiences that she was having with the particular person or persons at the time, right? It wasn't just the people weren't just conduits to her story, right? Like they were a part of the story. It felt like she handled that with care. And I just thought about the ways when you read, like if you read Revolutionary Suicide, if you read some of these men biographies, right, the centering of them, their experiences, their pain, their right, and the way in which she's telling this story, and for sure she's central. But like when people are important to her, when people are bridges to certain parts of her life from one point to the next, or they inform her in some kind of way, or they leave some kind of impression, you feel that in the book in the way in which she writes about them. And I just think that is such an awesome thing that she does in terms of taking care of these are real people. I don't want to call them characters, but the way the characters in her life, the way that she takes care to make sure that she's telling their story and to impress upon these people are important because they're important to my story, but they left a mark in their own way.
No, that's good. That's good.
That's really good. Yeah, I think she does an excellent job of highlighting the heroes and the heroines.
Mm-hmm.
And like I know that she had somewhat, just what I heard. But anyway, I know that she had a cantankerous or a challenging relationship with the Fanny Shakur. But yet she lived up to Fanny. She
Yes,
lived up to
yes.
Fanny and her importance at that time, particularly in the Panther 21.
Well,
You
I
know,
heard that.
when they call her, they say Assata is the soul of the Black Liberation Army. That's not her title, but
Mm-hmm.
she in that I think it's somewhere I can't remember where that was. I didn't or did I? Anyway, I might highlight that passage. But anyway, she takes it off herself, you know, and even like you know, just in discussing with her, you know, she doesn't see herself as this you know big revolutionary you know person. She sees herself as a worker,
Mm-hmm.
you
Right.
know, and doing the work. And because she's doing the work, America is trying to get her.
That's a
And
fact.
so that's where she is, and that's what she does. And I really like how she is humble in
Mm-hmm.
her discussion of her role and why she had to go under.
Okay. Let's hear from somebody.
My name is Assata Olubala Shakur. Assata means she who struggles. Olubala means for the people. And Shakur means the thankful. It is a name that I took to carry on the name of Zaid Malik Shakur in honor of his family and in honor of the forces of beauty and good on this earth, which I'm very grateful for. That is my name. I want to live in a country where the freedom means something.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the only way that we're going to realize um, freedom, justice, equality, decent living for people is if there's a complete change. A complete change. Everything has got to be turned around, and that's the revolution.
So those clips are from I think the 1997 album, not album, film "Eye of the Rainbow" on Assata. It's on YouTube, so I mean I just pulled those clips off of that. So you know there's more of that. The first part, it was more contemporary. That's from the 90s. Those other clips take us back to I believe the year was 1976. Interview with not televised, filmed interview with St. Clair Bourne, the legendary Black documentarian, which I haven't been able to find a copy of that. I would really love to actually see that thing. But anyway, some words from Assata Shakur herself. So what I wanted to do, before we get back to pulling out, some specific, what I want to say, some specific passages from the book. I know for myself, I was going, okay, let me pick out a few. And then once I got up to 25, I was like, oh, this is not going to work out. This is not going to work out too well, but I want to get at least a couple of those in that part of the conversation. But like for some people who actually might not even be terribly familiar with the story, who is Assata Shakur? So I wanted to get some things into the record. And one of which, up on the screen, we see the book cover Inadmissible Evidence by Evelyn Williams. Evelyn Williams is an important part of the Assata Shakur story. She's her aunt. Well, you know, and you all know well, y'all just read the book. I mean, Evelyn is a major character from her childhood, and both one of the few characters, one of the few people in the book who's a major character in both the coming of age story and the incarceration story. As y'all said, it's like it alternates between, you know, her growing up and, you know, her treatment after her capture, those years after her capture, you know, in May of 1973. So anyway, I want to read a few paragraphs from Evelyn Williams's book. So all that to say, Assata's book comes out in '87, and I'm glad you said what you said, Chinganji, about, you know, the popularity of this book, because surely that was something which created at least the idea that there would be a market for Evelyn Williams's book. You know, Inadmissible Evidence: The Story of the African American Trial Lawyer Who Defended the Black Liberation Army. And so it's well worth reading. It's well worth reading. But I wanted to just in terms of like, what's the word? Just kind of setting the picture of like who this figure is, who comes to be this, you know, notorious outlaw revolutionary who they are spending so much energy to publicize and ultimately capture. Who was that? So I'm going to read actually the first couple of paragraphs of Evelyn Williams's book, and then close it out with a couple more paragraphs. Like I said, she's got a personal stake in this story beyond merely being the lawyer. All right, let's go. Let's see here. Police sirens twisted around the corners of the night, menacing, searching, chasing, hunting down Joanne Chesimard, my only sister's first child, whom they called cop killer, bank robber, and a member of the terrorist gang of criminals, the Black Liberation Army, who was known to militants by her African name, Assata Shakur, whom I called Joey. It was in the spring of 1973, and for the last 2 years, the nationwide dragnet for her capture had intensified each time a young African American identified as a member of the BLA was arrested or wounded or killed. The Joint Terrorist Task Force, made up of the FBI and local police agencies around the country, issued daily bulletins predicting her imminent apprehension each time another bank had been robbed or another cop had been killed. Whenever there was a lull in such occurrences, they leaked information allegedly classified as confidential to the media, repeating past accusations and flashing her face across television screens and newspapers with heartbeat regularity, lest the public forget. For the first time in its history, the New York City Police Department equipped patrol cars with shotguns. More police were added to the force. Revised guidelines were issued. Travel only with a backup team and use caution in the chase. Special training programs in urban guerrilla warfare became mandatory, and printed instructions were distributed, detailing the degree of care to be used when stopping suspicious-looking Black men in vehicles or on the street, whether alone or in a crowd. Between January 1971 and February 1973, the FBI claimed that BLA members had attacked 22 policemen in cities across the country, from San Francisco to New York, including Atlanta, Houston, St. Louis, and New Orleans, had robbed innumerable banks to finance their primary goal, which, according to FBI intelligence, was to ambush and kill cops. The first incident that was catapulted into national prominence occurred in Manhattan on May 19th, 1971. Malcolm X's birthday, and 6 days after the Panther 21, members of the Black Panther Party were acquitted on charges of conspiracy. And then I close with this part, ending her part one. In 1973, let me finish. In 1973, I thought about the 1,000 African Americans who had been killed by police on the streets of America in the previous 2 years, and the 20 policemen who had lost their lives, allegedly from the guns of the Black Liberation Army. And I thought the equation did not balance. It was top heavy with Black people, weighted down with bullet fragments and twisted nooses. The equation will never be balanced, even after all the murders stop. Even then, history will report the one-sided picture of lynched Black bodies swinging from poplar trees in silent testimony. And I thought whether accepted or rejected, whether approved or disapproved, as long as all of the conditions that prevent inclusion continue, the possibility exists that another and another and another Black Liberation Army will emerge prepared to kill and to die. These were my thoughts when I heard the news flash about 1:30 in the morning on May 2nd, 1973. There'd been a shootout on the New Jersey Turnpike involving 2 state troopers and 3 people traveling south in a white Pontiac. 1 passenger and 1 state trooper were dead. 1 had escaped, and a woman was seriously wounded and captured. No names were given, but I knew it was Joey.
Yeah, that's good. That's powerful. I'm glad you read that because I'm going to be honest with you. I've tried to read Evelyn Williams' book several times. And it was because she's a lawyer, I found it challenging.
I skipped over her. I mean, with all due respect to Evelyn Williams, who's a very accomplished woman,
Very.
honestly was not interested at all in her career. That sounds bad to say. But I was reading the book really quite specifically for the Assata story, so I didn't pay a lot of attention to it. I shouldn't have said that publicly, should I have?
No,
that's not a good thing to say.
No, listen, but the thing that she does do in the book, and Evelyn Williams does in the book, that like from that piece that you did, which is her take on what happened at the New Jersey Turnpike and her connection to it,
right.
and her certainly she would have been involved with her niece anyway because of the closeness, but and also she talks about the land that they had in Wilmington, and that struggle to keep the land, you know, Black owned and for their family. And that was a whole long story that I had to kind of decipher through because she does use a lot of what I call legalese in it, but that's a powerful story. And that was part of Assata's upbringing and part of her politicization, actually being down in Wilmington every summer and seeing the racism and struggling to help her family keep their business, you know, which many people of African descent in that area just lost their land.
No, that's a straight up fact. That's a straight up fact. And yeah, like I say, she's got that. She's going to give you, well, here's the way in which white people are going to job you over if you're down south. And here's how it happens
right
up north. Yeah. She had that part going on. But no, I wanted to get that in because I kind of wanted to like kind of get kind of the basic story here of Assata. And so, yeah, you're right. So this, I thought that little passage from Evelyn Williams was good in terms of kind of painting the picture of like, what was this person's, you know, kind of profile, you know, national profile, if you will, prior to her being captured, because then it's going to go on from there. So yeah, so she's this notorious figure, and all that to say, you know, the story. So they capture her on May the 2nd of 1973. And they got her up on, not innumerable charges, we can count them. So they're going to put 9 indictments on her, and she's going to have 6 trials. And this is going to take us from 1973, from, you know, well, the summer, let's say, in 1973 to like the spring of 1977. And so not guilty or quashed indictments for years. And so this was also part of what's the word, the increase in her profile, because by 1973, I mean, you know, just in terms of history, just in terms of like the Black radicals, right, and their ultimate fates, right, and they're going up against the system and, you know, putting charges on them. So, you know, you did have these famous trials. Huey Newton's trial, you know, that's the. Let me say this right quick. Hopefully I don't lose my train of thought. But you can draw some significant, parallels between what happens to Huey Newton as a public figure after he gets into that shootout with the cops in October of 1967, with kind of what happens in the aftermath of what happens on the New Jersey Turnpike with Assata Shakur in 1973. In the sense that both certainly had some since they had a public profile. That's what I want to say. But the agony of the trial is the thing that really, makes these figures, what's the word? Just significantly more well known. You got Huey Newton's trial, but anyway, to come back to the story of like these trials, which are really, what's the word? Really big news stories in the country. Huey Newton, he gets convicted of a lesser charge and later it gets overturned. Bobby Seale, being tried for murder in New Haven, that generated a lot of attention. Him and Erica Huggins eventually found not guilty. That puts us somewhere around 70 or so. So the big one, I think the biggest one from an attention standpoint, Angela Davis gets arrested in October of 1970. And then I think it's some point in 1972, the summer or spring of 72, she gets found not guilty. And these were major stories. And I just want to say that from what I can see, that's kind of the end of that cycle. But then here's Assata Shakur. That's another one of these stories, right? The Black revolutionary who is facing all of these very serious charges. And it becomes an extended story because they got up on all these charges and they can't find her guilty of nothing. She gets some outright acquittals. In some cases, it's what do you call it? The other thing, the hung jury.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at those hung juries, and it's like it was 11-1 to convict. But there was that one brother or one sister who was saying, I don't care how much evidence you got. The sister is not guilty. You know what I'm saying? And it was very frustrating for the system, to like, damn, you know what I mean? They didn't get any. They kept on losing all of these cases. Finally, though, the big case, which is the so-called murder of the trooper in New Jersey in May of 73, we finally get a trial on that in early 1977. And she's found guilty. She's found guilty and sent away. But my point is 4 years of this, and I'm not saying all of these cases were front page news everywhere around the country. Not really. Certainly more local. But this is something which, what's the word? Assata talks about it in the book. She talks about how after she gets arrested, she starts getting all this mail from people who, you know what I mean, she doesn't know. And these are just people are supporting her and such. And so this is part of, what's the word? He ain't quite a legend, but this is kind of what makes Assata Shakur this not singular figure, but really one of the more prominent names in terms of talking about incarcerated Black revolutionaries. I'm trying to remember prior to her, liberation escape in November '79. I knew who she was, but what I can't go back and do is go like, what did I know about her other than just her being a sister who was in jail? I don't really know how much I knew about her before then. But I want to just finish this part here, which is to say, they finally found her not guilty in 1977. And as you can see from the headline there, you can see the big news, right? Big news. They finally got her. And, she gets sent away. But in terms of like the legend of Assata Shakur, it's going to grow even greater. In November of '79, when she is liberated from prison. We kind of mentioned that earlier today as well. And so the next person I want to hear from before we get back, let's hear from one of the people who was principally responsible for getting Assata out of prison. And so here's Sekou Odinga, who did his own time, 33 years or something like that. Anyway, let's hear from Sekou Odinga talking about Assata Shakur, the liberation, and kind of what she meant.
Well, why did the movement decide to liberate Assata Shakur?
Mostly opportunity. The opportunity presented itself, and it seemed possible. We were always looking for any of our comrades to help any of our comrades to be free. So when the opportunity showed itself and we were able to check it out and thought it was a good opportunity, that's how she was chosen. I think we were always, and not just us, all the comrades were always looking for an opportunity to help free a political prisoner or prisoner of the war. And so when that opportunity came, some of the folks that I was working with, we took the opportunity.
What do you remember about visiting Assata while she was incarcerated?
Assata was Assata. If you knew her, she was very intelligent. She was very focused. She always had ideas about what you could do to help in the community, what you could do to help a particular comrade, what you needed to do to make yourselves more efficient. And so visiting her that's how visiting her was, but she was a warm person. She was funny. She was real. She was just a real person that, like anybody, well, not just like anybody, but she was someone that I think was intelligent, committed, and always ready to give you some advice or to help you do what it is that you needed to do.
Now, this past November 2nd marked 36 years since Assata was liberated from prison. So why did this woman, Assata Shakur, become so important to the movement?
I think because of her commitment, because she was like me and you. She was regular people, and she was a captive, a political prisoner who found a way to be free when they told us she would never be free. And so it was an important victory for that in itself. But I think when you look at her, she just looks like any other sister, that might be in this audience, so people could relate to her. And so I think that's why she became so important, and people could see that, this is who I am, who we are, and the need to free our political prisoners was there, and she just made it real, and she made freeing political prisoners real. That you could actually free political prisoners more than one way. That
So my man Sekou Odinga, who earlier this year passed away, actually. He had a lot to say that's relevant to our tale there, actually. And I guess the main point I would want to make before I turn it back over to you guys is, but yeah, in terms of what Assata Shakur, means, over these several decades, that piece, the liberation, the successful liberation and escape from the tentacles of American injustice, make her maybe not absolutely a singular figure, but kind of. As I think she called it, I'm a 20, what did she say? I'm a 20th century, or did she say 21st century maroon? I think she said that at some point. But yeah, so Assata Shakur, so I'm still talking. I said I was going to stop. So she means a lot to, people who kind of believe in the cause of, Black liberation, right? But the other thing that somebody pointed out to me a few days ago, there's that. But the other thing to keep in mind, she means just as much
yes.
to the establishment. She
Mhm.
means just as much to the establishment. That's why they got the $2 million bounty out on her and all of that. All right, I'll stop. I promise I'll stop.
Yeah, I think that I think I did know of her prior to her incarceration. Um, I did know, and she says this, she was probably wanted for every crime that a woman was said to have participated in, and that she wasn't involved with every crime. And they were able to either get the hung jury or to get her acquitted on everything except for the state trooper, and that being because she was there. It was
Right,
obvious
right.
that, in her state, having been shot, that she could not have shot the trooper, right?
I think what I would want to say regarding the conviction is that's when she got the all-white jury, and that's the real difference. I don't think any of the other jurors were all white, but she got an all-white jury in New Jersey, and so everybody knew she was going down.
I don't know, because it seemed like some of the other jury, like the one that she talks about, that they ended up throwing out because they were back there talking about, yeah, she did it, she black. All the whole jury pool were back in the back, just like, and they got exposed. Yeah, they probably all did it. They black. They were doing this, they were doing that. Yeah, they black. So I don't really remember the makeup of the jury, but you're probably right.
Oh, there was a
And there's
whole
already the preponderance of that she must have done it because this is a state trooper and she's going against the state. So she was wrong in the first place for being there. And that's what she does, that she makes that statement, to my people.
Yeah, we want to get to that. I definitely want to get to that.
Yeah.
I just want to, but in terms of like I say, this thing really goes on for 4 years. But like there was a lot of action that her lawyers were trying to get out of that all-white jurisdiction, and they ultimately failed and got that all-white jurisdiction, and she went down for it. And that's the one where after maybe I'm actually taking one of you all's passages from the book, but that's the one where she's going like, man, I deeply regret having taken part in this trial because there was nothing real about this. Anyway,
I did have a question, and hopefully this doesn't come off uninformed to show my naivete, but as somebody who primarily studies the movement in the South, like anytime Black people are going to trial in the South, what's happening in terms of the outcome.
Right.
And to see these revolutionaries during this time get off, whether they're hung juries, whether they're right, like as people who lived through that, like I guess what was the thought process of seeing these people like get off? Were they like marked as wins for the movement? Did people feel like their victories for the movement? Did they feel like there was some hope of revolution or that, I've always had that question. Like when I've read, Huey, and like these are things like if these things had happened in the heart of Mississippi, forget even going to trial. Like these people would not have made it right to the jail to be to even get to the due process part of it. But the fact that these people went through that part of it, and these revolutionaries in some instances were able to get out and beat the system in some cases. How was that like perceived during that time?
Well, I can't speak at all for the movement, and actually, this is stuff a lot I read about. But we do know, and we do see those celebrations that take place. The sad, I'm gonna stop with this. The sad example that I would bring to your attention as a point of comparison is, of course, the great football player O.J. Simpson and how that trial played out.
For sure.
And Negroes was as happy as they could be.
For sure. For sure.
There's,
For sure.
I'm not here to compare OJ to
Just
Angela and Assata, but in terms of the dynamic, in terms of what a jury might do, right? If the jury ain't all white people, what the jury might do, right? To make the larger point, that would be my response.
Yeah,
Okay.
let me say this: she barely made it to the trial.
That's
They
true.
tried to
That's
kill
true.
her. They tried to
That's
kill her
true.
off. So
That's
she
true.
barely made it, and her life was in jeopardy at every point.
Yep.
At every point. You know, from putting her into, you know, solitary confinement and giving her the worst conditions. I mean, they were trying to kill her. And and that would have served their purpose.
That's
That
true.
would serve the purpose.
That's true.
And I think that, you know, as in the movement, her getting off on all those cases that was a celebration. That was a celebration. And then nobody was surprised about the state trooper, you know, because like you said to Kwame, that, you know, the jury pool, one
She
of the
was
things,
toast.
yeah.
She
And
was
the jury,
always toast.
what I learned in this, in her recounting of it, is how racist New Jersey was, you know,
Makes that
and
point.
yeah, and that the whole point what they were saying, she talks about being on that New Jersey Turnpike. When she gives her apology, she's like, I shouldn't have been there. I know better. We know better, you know. And she was living underground at that time. So my thought, well, as I read this, and I don't know, you know, maybe I did know back in the day, but I didn't remember it. Someone snitched them out, obviously, and said that they were going to be there. And that they were, you know, that they were moving that way. It wasn't random that they pulled them over for a faulty tail light. Um, I think someone snitched them out, and that's how they were captured. Because that's what was going on. We got, you know, snitches and
Oh yeah,
yeah.
that's a
So
fact. That's a fact.
so
Yeah.
I can't remember when, but sometime recently, some folks sued state of New Jersey for the stops on the New Jersey Turnpike, and there was a settlement. So this is sort of a historical in terms of, you know, black people. I mean, black people in the highway being stopped by the police everywhere. But in terms of what happened on the New Jersey Turnpike, there was a court case, and folks sued and somebody won. I can't remember who and what and all the particulars, but yeah.
I know that there is an audio version of this To My People, because I remember hearing it. I don't have access to it.
I was trying to locate that too, because I don't, no dice.
Somebody got it in their archives.
Yeah, hopefully if they do have it, it's like still, what's the word, audible, because, you know, 50 years of cassette tape action without preservation.
Well, you know, honestly, I don't know who put my interview on YouTube, but I'm glad they did. Because we got it on a real bootleg kind of, it was, you know, we tried to be all professional, but we was real bootleg, just setting up
Of course, that's the way it is.
So it was no professional camera. We did our own questions, we did our own lighting. We just, you know, we wanted
it was cool. No, it's a great document. It's a great document. Like I say, you know, you did your job, but you were happy that day.
I was happy. Definitely. You can tell how elated. Quite an experience. So.
All right, y'all.
I'd like to read that. That's one of the things that I highlighted. Her speech. Is that all right?
I was just going to say, now let's turn to some of our favorite passages, and we won't get to nearly my 25.
No, I got about 50 of them. You said you had 25.
Well, now let's do about maybe 2 apiece right now, and you know, then let's try to integrate it into some of the rest of the stuff that we want to try to do, maybe.
Okay, so I'm going to do For My People, To My People. And it was on July 4th, 1973. They broadcasted on several radio stations. I made like a little note, you know, that basically they tried to imprison her, to isolate her. And there was total disrespect for her healing And so by broadcasting her story, she took the covers off.
Mm-hmm.
Do you mind if I read it?
Yeah, I mean, you see, I had it up on the screen.
Okay. All right.
I was, yeah, by all means. Let me just say that, by all means.
Okay, that was a powerful moment to me. I remember hearing it. Like I said, I don't know. I should
Maybe not the whole thing, not the entire
okay, I'll
thing.
just read part of it. It's very long. I'll just read
Yeah.
part of it. Black brothers, Black sisters, I want you to know that I love you. And I hope that somewhere in your hearts you have love for me. My name is Assata Shakur, slave name Joanne Chesimard, and I am a revolutionary, a Black revolutionary. By that I mean that I have declared war on all forces that have raped our women, castrated our men, and kept our babies empty bellied. I have declared war on the rich who prosper on our poverty, the politicians who lie to us with smiling faces, and all the mindless, heartless robots who protect them and their property. I am a Black revolutionary, and as such, I am a victim of all the wrath, hatred, and slander that America is capable of. Like all other Black revolutionaries, America is trying to lynch me. I am a Black revolutionary woman. And because of this, I have been charged with and accused of every alleged crime in which a woman was believed to have participated. The alleged crimes in which only men were supposedly involved, I have been accused of planning. They have plastered pictures alleged to be me in post offices, airports, hotels, police cars, subways, banks, televisions, and newspapers. They had offered over $50,000 in rewards for my capture, and they have issued orders to shoot on sight and shoot to kill.
Give me one more paragraph,
One
and
more.
then I'm gonna have you read the end.
Powerful. Isn't it powerful? I am a Black revolutionary, and by definition, that makes me a part of the Black Liberation Army. The pigs have used their newspapers and TVs to paint Black Liberation Army as vicious, brutal, mad dog criminals. They have called us gangsters and gun moles and have compared us to such characters as John Dillinger and Ma Barker. It should be clear, it must be clear to anyone who can think, see, or hear that we are the victims and not the criminals.
I lied. Give me one more paragraph.
All right. It should be, it should also be clear to us by now who the real criminals are. Nixon and his crime partners have murdered hundreds of third world brothers and sisters in Vietnam, Cambodia, Mozambique, Angola, and South Africa. As was proved by Watergate, the top law enforcement officials in this country are a lying bunch of criminals. The president, two attorney generals, the head of the FBI, the head of the CIA, and half the White House staff have been implicated in the Watergate crimes.
I just love that when she calls them a lying bunch of criminals. That kills me. That kills
and even the next section, I want to do the next section too, because I just
you got to do the last. You got to go to the section that starts with "I want to apologize."
Oh yeah. I like that too. Okay.
Yeah. Just in the interest of time, we can't do the whole thing.
Oh no. Okay. I want to apologize to you, my Black brothers and sisters, for being on the New Jersey Turnpike. I should have known better. The Turnpike is a checkpoint where Black people are stopped, searched, harassed, and assaulted. Revolutionaries must never be in too much of a hurry or make careless decisions. He who runs when the sun is sleeping will stumble many times. Yeah, this is powerful. Powerful.
What, you stopping? You stopping now?
Oh, okay. So every time a freedom fighter is murdered or captured, the pigs try to create the impression that they have quashed the movement, destroyed our forces, and put down the Black Revolution. The pigs also try to give the impression that 5 or 10 guerrillas are responsible for every revolutionary action carried out in America. That is nonsense. That is absurd. Black revolutionaries do not drop from the moon. We are created by our condition, by our oppression. We're being manufactured in droves in ghetto streets, places like Attica, San Quentin, Bedford Hills, Leavenworth, and Sing Sing. They are turning out thousands of us. Many jobless Black veterans and welfare mothers are joining our ranks. Brothers and sisters from all walks of life who are tired of suffering passively make up the BLA. And I'm just going to skip over that, but I'm going to go to this next, the thing she does at the very end.
How you gonna skip over that last paragraph?
Okay. I'm
How
sorry.
you gonna, well, how's
There
she gonna
is
do that?
and always will be until every Black woman, Black man, woman, and child is free, a Black Liberation Army. The main function of the Black Liberation Army at this time is to create good examples, to struggle for Black freedom, and to prepare for the future. We must defend ourselves and let no one disrespect us. We must gain our liberation by any means necessary. It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love each other and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains.
So I think this is a really important document, a really important statement that she makes. I think it's a classic piece of, I'm not sure what the exact academic term should be, but it's a classic piece of Black writing. And since it was oral originally, a classic piece of Black, I guess it's not quite oratory, but here's one. It's a classic piece of Black rhetoric. It's a classic, absolutely classic piece of Black rhetoric. And she says a whole lot here. There's a whole lot here that we really don't even have time to get deep into, but I do want to get into it a little bit. What you start, Chinganji, in terms of, any particular part you want to, highlight and emphasize or something? I got a couple.
Yeah, I have a couple. I have probably more than a couple, but I'll start with a couple because
same.
When she when she says they call us murderers,
yes,
who are the real murderers?
Yeah.
Who is committing murder on all these countries as well as Black people here? We, as a nation of people inside the United States, we are being murdered daily, and yet they accuse us. And then I think that the fact that she says it's so important that we organize, that I think that's what I get. It's so important that we organize, because if we don't organize against oppression, they will kill us. They will kill us. So it's our duty, she says. It's our duty to fight for our freedom. It's our duty to win.
There's probably a few things made an impression on you, Charlotta. Any particular one you want to maybe highlight for our attention?
Since you had put up the slide, I won't read slide 11. I won't read it. But it is that nobody in the world, nobody in history has ever gotten their freedom by appealing to the moral sense. Right. So right. I think yeah. So I think that, like early on when she's like outlining her life in the South as a child of the South.
I'm sorry, Charlotta. I would stand with for my people. I mean,
I'm
to
sorry.
my people.
I'm sorry. I thought you were saying go to your passages. I'm sorry.
Oh no, well, we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. I want to stay with this particular document for a second.
Okay, then go. What did you ask me then? Because then I
was particular part of it.
Get my piece in. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm not mad at you.
I can go, and while you figure out what stood out to you.
Yeah, go.
Well, a bunch of things, like Chinganji said, a bunch of things. I'm struck by the persona. I'm struck by the what's the word? I don't think audacity is the right word, right? But Black brothers, Black sisters, I want you to know that I love you, and I hope somewhere in your heart you have love for me, right? So, and then she says later on, I want to apologize to you for being on the New Jersey Turnpike. So what I'm struck by is the sense in which she assumes that she means something to Black people, right? She has, what's the word? she's not seeking that. She's responding to that kind of mind. So I'm struck by that. And like I say, she wants to apologize to us for getting caught. I'm just struck by the, you know what I'm saying? The consciousness that produces that sort of articulation.
But I think throughout the entire text, she has an accountability to Black folks, right? And so to me, that's what that is, right? Like, I'm accountable to you. And so by putting myself in that situation as a Black revolutionary who's accountable to the revolutionary and to the people, I put myself in a perilous situation, or a careless situation, or a situation where I should have been more on point, understanding how they work, right? And moving outside of that. So no, I agree with that. I think as a historian, I'm always gonna go with the history and the fact that in this piece, I mean, she goes from lynching, I mean, like, you know, she has a sense of what's happening at the time, Vietnam, right? Like, she's unpacking all of the ways in which not only Black people at home, but people of color throughout the world are being oppressed. Call back to the murders of Emmett Till, to King, to even civil rights workers, right? James Chaney, right? She has a historical callback, touch back to what's happened to people throughout the movement, right? And so the fact that sort of in this piece that she's able to, like, again, kind of make those connections, make those ties, unpack that history in a way in which she situates her situation within that, but understanding that this is a larger historical truth and a larger historical trajectory that Black people have found themselves faced with. I'm not the only. I'm a part of this. I'm a part of this. Yeah. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
No, exactly.
So I think for me, in that definitely stood out to me.
Yeah, the connection with the people, the connection. It's not about her.
Right.
And if you know, I mean, if people did know about this document, that you know, they wouldn't have been surprised that she wrote a great book, you know, 15 years later. Because like I say, this is everything you all said, a masterpiece of rhetoric. And like I say, like, they call us thieves and bandits, but you know, everything that y'all said, it's great.
Can I say one other quick thing about it too, that I like that she defines the terms.
Yeah.
Yeah, she defines. This is what I mean when I say I'm a revolutionary. This is what I mean when I say they are murderers. You know, and so I like that she defines what we're doing. Why is there a Black Liberation Army? What's the need for it? What is their job right now? You know, and what's going on? So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So you know, well, anyway, there's the tone of definite defiance. In addition to everything we said, she has assumed that she actually has a place in the consciousness of her people, but then there is this, like I say, to my people is just a straight defiance. I'm definitely continuing down this road. We're right, they're wrong. You know what I mean? They are the thieves, they are the murderers, they are the bandits. So a couple of points then. So like I said, masterpiece of rhetoric. But then toward the end there, you know, this whole point about how Black revolutionaries are being manufactured in droves, they're turning out thousands of us and such like that. Now we have to admit that that's extreme hyperbole, don't we? I mean, nothing of the kind happened, really, right? I mean, if you want to be, you know, and we got the historian here, so we have to be technically accurate, right? So she's writing here in the summer of 73. Now the BLA has been completely decimated. You know what I mean? There is no more, well, when I say no more, there's more effective BLA, right? Everybody they were looking for, they either killed or had put in jail. When they killed Twyman Myers in, I think, November of 73, they say, you know, that's pretty much it. And from a standpoint of talking about what are the, like, actions that one associates with the BLA, you really don't have anything after 73 until you get into the very end of the 1970s, and that's kind of a different thing a little bit. So just to say, beautiful rhetoric. But like I say, I mean, since we got historian in the house, we got to admit, well, Assata, we understand prophecy and rhetoric and such, but no, they pretty much have wiped you out. They pretty much have wiped you out. Y'all are on the run, and they've wiped you out. That's actual, and that's the real part about it. The other piece I would say, yeah, I mean, I like, what's the word? I mean, she's not really telling you, see, Shinganji, I don't think I'm going to go with you when you say, like, she really defines, like, the Black Liberation Army. I don't really think she does. She gives you kind of some hints, but she's not, I mean, this thing does not really at all state, okay, here's our program, here's what we're about, anything like that. She just states a tone of defiance and the necessity for there to be an armed response, but she don't really get into it. And I'm not saying that was the place of that letter to my people to do that. But like, so one of the questions which, I'll see if we even get a chance to get into, is, I mean, what is there to state factually about what the Black Liberation Armies, actually was about? We know what they were alleged to have committed, but by definition, an underground, right, operation isn't necessarily, what's the word, publicizing everything. Although, what you do have, I mean, you do have, after sometimes some of these cops got killed, you do have these statements that got released, and we could talk about a couple of those. But before, let's see, let me table that, just because we were still on the general subject of you all discussing some of your favorite passages from the book. So let me get back into that, and let's see if in the course of the conversation we can get back into, okay, how well can we actually define this thing called the BLA? So I'm throwing it back to you all to tell us more about, like, what some of the more interesting, compelling parts of the book.
Mm-hmm.
You said you had 25. No, you said you had 50. Shinganji said she had 50.
I was letting Sherlina go next.
Oh, that's true. Okay, let's let her go.
Because she was already geared up, so I'll let her go to next, and we can, time permitting, circle back. I can go to some of my favorite passages.
No, you can. I know this.
I think the one was, as I said, because you had it there on the slide, I didn't want to, or I could, because you just had the first paragraph of that sentence. But the nobody in the world, nobody in history has ever gotten their freedom by appealing to the moral sense of the people who oppressed them, which was one of the passages of many that I took away. But then she goes further down when she's unpacking that again. And she's talking about this early on in her days in Wilmington, that she, at a young age was developing a class consciousness, right? And so even in that piece of it, she starts to sort of unpack that, right? So
the alley rats.
Yeah. Well, in this, the almighty dollar is king. Those who have the most money control the country, and through campaign contributions. So she's critiquing the political system and the politics of it, and the rich have always used racism to maintain power. So again, sort of that kind of unpacking of the ways in which class and racism cannot be separated from each other. But this other passage, and this is going towards the end of the book, and I'm in chapter 12, where she talks about she's talking about her time. I think she's at Manhattan Community College at this time, right? So as Black Studies professor, she's into her Black Studies phase, where she's coming into her understanding of who she is as a person, and then connecting that with the Black Studies movement of the time. And then I think I'm here on page 181, where she talks about, or she says, no movement can survive unless it's constantly growing and changing with the times.
I got that highlighted too.
Yeah, if it isn't growing, it's stagnant. And without the support of the people, no movement for liberation can exist, no matter how correct its analysis of the situation is. That's why political work and organizing are so important. Unless you are addressing the issues people are concerned about and contributing positive direction, they'll never support you. First thing that the enemy tries to do is isolate revolutionaries from the masses of people, making us horrible and hideous monsters so that our people will always hate us, right?
Is
So
there any self-critique in that, in your mind when y'all read that?
critique of myself or critique
No, 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 no.
of the
Assata, self-critique
critique
is
of
Assata. I'm not saying
okay.
only. I'm not saying only, but I'm saying is self-critique a part of that paragraph? You think, or am I introducing this concept?
Maybe I mean I didn't read it like that, right? I thought again, as she's becoming more integrated into the organizational part of the movement, right? Her consciousness is evolving, and she's with uh these different student orgs at the community college. I think she's getting a sense of how excuse me, organizations, how the hierarchies in these organizations can then suppress, because they get so caught up in the bureaucracy of it all, how they can sort of suppress the movement itself and then separate itself from the people. So I don't know if it's critique
Well,
per se. I saw that more of the ways in which organizations operate, and how if they get too bogged down in their own stuff, how they
yeah.
then can then separate themselves from the people. And so I think she may at that time, to me, be seeing more of what's happening as she becomes more involved and connected to organizations proper, and not just the movement as a sort of an amorphous thing that she's sort of trying to find her way and navigate
Okay.
through.
You don't think that last sentence is at least partly a reflection on the fate of the Black Liberation Army? The first thing the enemy tries to do is isolate revolutionaries from the masses of people, making us horrible and hideous monsters so that our people will hate us. Isn't that very consistent with like just her general rhetoric about how the BLA was, came off? Anyway, this is a minor point. A minor point.
But,
Yeah,
if that's a point you making, you should stay. You should. I don't necessarily disagree with that. But I would like to hear more about what you're saying in terms of that being a self critique. To me, that's a system critique of the way in which, when she says the first thing the enemy tries to do is isolate revolutionaries, right? Go ahead. I'm sorry, because I feel like this is at the time where, if we're talking about, because later on that she starts talking about Huey Newton and the ways in which he becomes elevated and separated, right? And so
the supreme, what was his name? The supreme
Supreme Commander,
the supreme servant,
and then the Supreme Servant, right? With the $650 apartment that she talks about. So I mean, that's the way that I saw it. But we all have our lens. I like to hear what you think, and
then can I circle back to, because I was waiting for Dr. Akinyele Umoja to comment, which he did, and I knew that he would. When you said that the Black Liberation Movement was squashed and there was no activity, I want to circle back because I disagree with that too.
Okay. All right.
Because I don't think that we need to know everything that the BLA was doing. I don't think that we should know everything that the BLA was doing, and we really don't know who was doing that work. And Dr. Umoja says in the chat, he says, the BLA activity existed until early 1980s. Check out his essay, and he's a historian, so he know, or his research did. But I think that there was activity post her liberation, and I don't know that we should be privy to it all. And we definitely don't need to know who was doing what. I think she does give somewhat of a definition of what the BLA is as for a mass statement. Okay. I don't expect her to go into it and define it specifically, because the reason it's an underground movement is because it's underground. So that's my point.
Y'all go. Somebody else, give me something else they want.
No, you could go ahead.
Oh man, like I say, man. So I had my list of about first of all, I had a list of about 60 things that I identified. Then I went through and I said, well, let me highlight just the major ones, and that's how we got to 25. And I was like, okay, how many did I just put an asterisk by? And that's about 8. So let me see. Since we kind of been on that a little bit, her take on the Black Panther Party, haven't been a part of it. This is 87. And so in 1987, I think she gives us a pretty healthy and harsh critique of the leadership of the Black Panther Party. She gives us like I think you all have mentioned. She gives us some very specific sort of criticism of not Henry Newton. I don't know who Henry Newton is. Of Huey Newton. I'm not even sure how much it was in print in terms of movement. People like really going at Newton behind that whole supreme commander, supreme servant business. But some of that stuff was good. But yeah. She had a whole larger critique. She's like, the Black Panther Party had a lot going on. They had a lot of positive. And I'm looking at specific passages, generally speaking. She's like, but you know what? They said political education was important, but political education was one of the very weakest things those people did. Those people who were leading those political education classes, they didn't hardly know nothing. She kind of goes through it. I mean, she obviously has her people who she admires in the party there as well. Y'all mentioned Zaid earlier, and there are others. But I think in terms of like like say a harsh and I think merited not unfair critique of some of the Black Panther Party practices. Mentioned a bunch of people by name. Robert Bay, and a bunch of others. Just in terms of this is pretty. Yeah, there's no reason anybody should want to be led by anybody. With this sort of behavior. I thought all of that was all of that stuff made an impression on me then. And more recently. Yeah. I'll stop just because I got a whole bunch more.
Well, I'm gonna go.
Hey, I just said I was going to stop. Can I do one piece? Can I do one more piece before you go in?
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. That was me. That was me saying I was going to stop and lying once again. So one thing I did want to put in the conversation, because she on page 205 talks about an incident, which I think is something which really she says is really makes a big impression on me. I said it was 205. Maybe I got the page wrong. I do. I don't know what page I'm on. So anyway, page 206. She talks about the impression that Jonathan Jackson, his assault on. Let me get over here and do this. I mean, a famous photo for anybody who was around then. I was 11 years old when I saw this stuff. I mean, it didn't, I don't know how well I particularly processed it, but certainly, years later, I kind of was like, oh, okay, yeah. But anyway, I mean, that was a national story. Anyway, I think she does tie, this incident into her sense, certainly, of growing militancy. I think the impression I got was that this was an event that for a lot of people at least a number of people in that generation, actually something that kind of encouraged them toward the armed revolt, as opposed to like discourage them because, of course, you look at this picture and everybody was slaughtered, except Ruchell McGee, who I think is still in jail 50-something years later. But it was a galvanizing event, even though it was it was utterly doomed, and like they say, they all got shot to shit, you know. But still, that didn't make people run. That made people be more interested in that sort of direction. I think she kind of says, I don't know if she says that outright, but that was an impression I got.
I'm sorry. What was the impression that she thought that it scared people off, or
no, the opposite. The opposite.
Okay.
That it made it made people like her kind of more interested in like taking this thing to another level, you know. So, I mean, it was one of those events. It was one of those events. But after this, this is when she joins the party. After that, she talks about going to the funeral. Let me see. I'm on page 207. Let me see. If you are deaf, dumb, and blind to what's happening in the world, you're under no obligation to do anything. But if you know what's happening and you don't do anything but sit on your ass, then you're nothing but a punk. Anyway, she joins the party shortly after this. So it's certainly an event in her life, that not in her life because it wasn't her, but you know, it's something which makes an impression on her and furthers her path of militancy, and also, like, ultimately, obviously, the underground and presumably the armed struggle. Anyway, August 7th of 1970. Boy, we don't even have time to talk about that, but that was certainly something that's part of her narrative. All right, y'all, your turn, Chinganji. I interrupted you a few minutes ago.
No worries. Because I have a lot too. But I want to go to how she really talks about misogyny.
Oh, yes.
And one of the things that I wrote down, and this is coming from page 106, and I just wrote down my commentary on that Black women always have a target on their back. And here she says, any Black woman, practically anywhere in America, can tell you about being approached, propositioned, and harassed by white men. Many consider all Black women potential prostitutes. And
Yep.
she writes this when she's narrating about her experience living in the village where I think you mentioned this earlier about them trying to pull a train on her. And then she has the experience where she's working and this man's constantly feeling on her. And the danger that women face, particularly Black women, because they're always a target or seen as these promiscuous women that are wanting of the attention and need the attention of white men and don't deserve anything better than to be treated like a piece of meat. So that's one of the things that I really wanted to highlight for her talking and, you know, really prophesying based on some of the experience that she had, and then even as a movement person, having that issue as well. And you know, and how part of that misogyny that she speaks to is some of the Black men that she encountered who don't like Black women either. You know, because she's talking about, you know, that all of them, they don't like the Black woman. She's the sapphire, and they're only interested in white women. And so that's her experience with living on the street. And so that's like a phenomenal insight that she had. I mean, important insight that she has, I think, from the book.
And I just want to piggyback on that with particular one of the many quotes that I highlighted on page 115. So she's talking about that when they were trying to gang rape her. And on the bottom of the page, she says, I thought a lot about those boys after that night. I hated them, but what I couldn't understand is why they hated me so much.
Yeah, yeah.
She was living in the village alone at 13.
Yeah.
Was it 13? I mean, because she ran away a couple of times.
When her
she might have been 16 in the village, but anyway, she ran away multiple times.
Right. When her aunt came to retrieve her and went to the flop house or whatever it was and and
Oh,
confronted the guy, and like, you had a 13-year-old living here,
Yeah.
right? So the fact that she was discovering all of this at an early age, for sure, I think.
she's a very precocious individual. She's a
Oh,
very precocious individual.
to say
You
the
know,
least.
all throughout. Yeah, exactly. Let me see if I can find something related to that. Do y'all remember the Jailbait song? This is from that same
Yeah, that's all.
that same chapter.
Uh-huh.
That's some funny stuff. That's some funny stuff. He's out there trying to play an adult, and the dude
Everybody
says,
know you,
I'm
baby.
writing a song for you.
Yeah.
Do you want to hear it? Ta-da-da-da-da-da, jailbait. Oh man, she's like, I could have died right then and there. That was the end of my crush. Yeah, no, she's got a lot of stuff in there like that. That's great. Charlotta, so before she joins the Panthers, she gives us a couple of chapters where I just think, I don't know. I was going, like, in terms of like the youth movement, you know, which is kind of one of your main fields of study there as well. You know, I thought she offered a lot of very useful testimony, you know, just in terms of being able to talk about like what was some of the thinking of people during that time. You know, she talks about all that stuff. You know, the book she was reading. She talks about, like, you know, growing the afro. She talks about like some of these conversations she's having, and she kind of goes through that. You know, so anyway, I thought that was useful, just in terms of kind of giving you a little glimpse into like, well, here's a report of what some Black students at I think at a couple MCC primarily, I think, but maybe somewhere else. I thought
I mean,
I thought that had some
yeah,
real value.
I think also too, before she gets there, when she's really young and she's in the South, she encounters, right, some youth movement activity. She's aware of what's happening with the sit-in movement
All right.
and that early movement, right? So she's, you know, on
Oh
both
yeah.
ends, sort of aware of what's happening with young people at these different junctures when young people are spearheading the movement in those different periods.
No, exactly. Let me see. So, what, 138 or so? She talks about how, okay, yeah, I think, is that the NAACP? Who is it? Yeah. NAACP. She's down south, and so she's checking them out because she gives some details about what it is, what it means to be driving around in the South back during segregation. But anyway, she talks about going to see the meetings where they're training people, and she's going like, well, she's quoting the meeting, right? So what will you do if they spit on you? I just go on singing. That's what the person responded. And she goes, well, that was just too much for me. You know? And then on the next page, like I say, like Chingaji, like I say, we can just sit up here and just like go all night, just like pulling out quotes. But on the next page, she's kind of like, okay, sum up, okay, here's kind of my take on the civil rights movement. Because she says, I remember how I felt in those days. I wanted to be an American just like any other American. I wanted a piece of America's apple pie. But she goes on to say, here's actually Charlotta's quote: nobody in the world, nobody in history has ever gotten their freedom of appearance in the moral sense of the people who are present. It's that next sentence that actually is the one that I highlighted. Once you study and really get a good understanding of the way the system in the United States works, then you see without a doubt that the civil rights movement never had a chance to succeed. So, I mean, this is just some very powerful testimony that this sister offers here, man. It's very close to 3 o'clock, and we haven't gotten to half of what I wanted to get to. I mean, so we can begin to wind it down, or we can go a little bit longer if you all aren't pressed for time. You tell me.
I'm a little pressed. I have something else I have to do.
Okay. Well, we'll go ahead then.
As well. But yeah.
All right. Well, let me see. Let me just look at that agenda right quick. Well, all right. Since we are damn near at 3 o'clock, then I think we'll just go to because at least we touched on some of the main things, I think, although there's a whole lot I would like to. You know what? The last thing that we did say we were going to do was, and you might have done a little bit of it already, but still, Chinganji, since you're someone who actually has visited Cuba a couple of times and actually visited with the sister, me and Charlotta just kind of wanted to like hear you kind of give us a little whatever to whatever extent it's up there. I know you haven't seen her in a number of years, but any particular what observations or remarks you want to make having actually spent some time with her a couple times?
Okay, yeah, I would love to do that. One of the things that I had highlighted was when she chose to have her child.
Okay.
And so, and what I wrote down was that out of trauma comes beauty. And that particular time, I do believe it was that time when I was able to go down and we were invited to do the interview. Her daughter, Kikuya, was had moved to Cuba with her and had learned Spanish, and had created a community with the with other Cuban children that were there, and she was attending school, and Assata was learning how to be a mom, a full-time mom, which she had not had the opportunity to do. It took her like 5 years before she was able to reconnect, with her family because of the situation. And so then shortly after that, Kikuya came to live. I believe she only stayed maybe 2 years, and then they decided it wasn't the best environment for her, or Kikuya didn't want to do it anymore. I don't blame her because living in Cuba is a little different. But I will say that, my experience with her was always challenging because she would always, first she'd want to cut it up with whatever was going on politically back home. And then she would, I think that people need to know that, living as a revolutionary is not an easy life. Not living in exile is not an easy life. No, she was no longer in prison here in the States, but she still could not live like she wanted to live in Cuba. Cuba is different. And so she would always want to know, what are the popular sayings? What are the popular dances? What are people talking about back home? And would always want to, send a message of encouragement. Sometimes it was by writing, sometimes it was just discussion. But sometimes, one of the things that I appreciated, sometimes we would just have time, just women time, sister time, just to cut it up and talk about, experience of, well, for her dating and trying to live a life in Cuba and trying to survive. And then her connections politically were mostly with the Communist Party, and they actually provided a stipend for her. I think they talk about that in that particular. Oh, she might talk about it here when she talks about being in Cuba. But yeah, so they accepted her, and she went to the party school, the Communist Party school. She became a part of their speakers bureau, so to speak, where she primarily talked about the experience of Black people and how that related and what was different about that than the support for the Cuban government. And so now I think I told you, Tukwame, I've been out of touch with her. I used to go quite often, but been out of touch with her because after they raised that bounty, then she was no longer able to move around. Before that, she would speak at conferences and had an opportunity to do like a couple of conferences, women's conferences, and she was able to come and speak and exchange information. And one of my favorite things is I took my child at the time, who was about 11, I think, and down there for one of the conferences, and Assata just like warmed to her and picked her brain about everything that was going on. And so it's like the missing of home. And I can only imagine now that, after COVID and the bounty on her head, that she's even more isolated. So, just things to share on that level. I enjoy my arguing with her politically and hearing the stories and hearing how she saw things happening and what she was able to do there.
Mm.
Yeah, cool. Well, I guess we're winding on down. One thing, I'm gonna get the last word from you, Charlotte. One thing I wanted to go through a couple of these pictures and make another point about this woman and her profile, her reputation, the way in which she, like I say, became, I think, an object of great interest, if not fascination, for a lot of people. As Evelyn Williams was saying, a whole lot of people who definitely wouldn't even begin to share her politics, but they identified with this person. Sekou Odinga, I think he was also kind of making this point in terms of how Assata's just like just you and me. Um, so one point I wanted to make is that over the course of those years, when they got her incarcerated, I just want you to look at her. Actually, just look at her bearing. You know what I mean, in terms of this person who's up against all these charges and all that, life sentence and all of that. Uh, I mean, it doesn't hurt that she was a good-looking woman either, but more, you know, these sort of images. This is her, like I say, during these years where they have got her and she's on trial for her life. Uh, You know, this particular photo reminds me of an encounter that she has in jail. She talks about in the book, and she's talking to some sisters who are incarcerated, and then they go, "Wait a minute, you the one they've been looking for? Well, you just a little old thing, you know." Uh, uh, but I'm just saying, something very striking is her bearing under these sort of circumstances. I mean, we've read some of her words. We spent a little time with "To My People" and everything. But I think that was also part of. I'm like, so this is before my time, but I'm just imagining in terms of like people going, yeah, I'm with her, right? Some 76, why is she smiling actually? And that was why. You know what I mean? That was why. And then we go, I do remember this from the late 70s, well, I guess that'd be the early 80s. I remember this mugshot circulating. But, you know, the legend of Assata Shakur, you know what I'm saying? Like I say, she's the one that got away. She's the maroon. Like I say, how she say it? Bye now. And then, last word, Charlotte. I got one more slide. So last word for both of you, because we're going to wind on down because Chinganji's got to go.
Yeah, I'm gonna let Charlotta take the last word. I might be done. I'll think about it.
No, I just want to. I just appreciate this moment. I appreciate, again, like I said, just the juxtaposition of when I read it. Now I'm in my grown womanness, reading this in a different way, and so the way in which her articulations of freedom and revolution and all these things read to me so much different now, as opposed to a 20-something-year-old now that I'm in my 40s. And so I just appreciate having this forum in this place to be able um to revisit this work, because so often, we're moving on to the next thing. So often we're moving on to the next text, next book, that we often don't revisit things because we feel like we've read it and we know it. And like I've been reintroduced to Assata here, and so I just appreciate the forum and the space to have been able to do that.
All right, all right. Well, that's good. That's good. Like I say, stuff we didn't get a chance to talk to, like in terms of these police shooters. Y'all remember this? This wasn't all that long ago. We don't like those are single actors, so we don't have time to really get into that story. I figured we wouldn't. The one thing I will put up here, we were making reference earlier in the program to the interview that Chinganji did with Assata Shakur on YouTube. Uh, that's the title of it. That's the link. There's that. Thanks a lot to both of you for being a part of that. You obviously were essential and indispensable and made this thing happen. And I do think that we did collectively manage to get a few issues on the table and have some intelligent discussion about. So from my standpoint, you know what I mean, that's a win.
Thank you,
So thanks.
Amy.
So
I
thank you.
appreciate you doing this too. We're celebrating 45 years of freedom, so we need that as a victory, a
No,
victory
absolutely.
for our movement. I'm kind of like Charlena. I'm glad to revisit it because I realized that I had not read it since it came out, and that was prior to me meeting her, and it really hit me different as I went through it. And I'm appreciative of being able to look at this and see what this book still means for our movement. Yeah, and for young people.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And as we all three of us know, there was so so much more that we all had written down that we wanted to get to. But that's how it goes. And that's the mark of a very rich text. Like those were points I was making earlier. I mean, this I don't know if it has that reputation, amongst scholars of literature or something like that. But man, to me, this is a classic.
Yeah,
To me,
look at all my.
yeah, no, for real, I believe it. I believe it. I believe it. So thank you to Chinganji Akinyela, founding member of the New African Peoples Organization, and the one and only Dr. K. Charlotta Kinchin, historian, undergraduate director for the Pan-African Studies Department at the University of Louisville. And so the very last word then, because I'm going to sign off when this video ends, let's hear from my girl again.
My name is Assata Olubala Shakur. Assata means she who struggles. Olubala means for the people. And Shakur means the thankful. It is a name that I took to carry on the name of Zaid Malik Shakur in honor of his family and in honor of the forces of beauty and good on this earth, which I'm very grateful for. That is my name.
Good night. No, good afternoon, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you all.
Okay.
All right.
See you.
Peace.